we're going to talk about a big show. We're going to talk about the Chanel show that everyone basically has been talking about, and I haven't really shared my thoughts about until now, basically. But so much to talk about, so many points that need to be made. So this basically is Matthieu Blazy's second Chanel collection. It's also his first Métiers d'Art collection. For people that don't know kind of what the Métiers d'Art is, so there's a subsidiary of Chanel. It's called Paraffection. It was established in 1985, and the goal of this subsidiary essentially is to preserve the craft and skills of artisans, right? So in France, historically, you have these like specialist workshops, these specialist craftspeople, people that have been doing embroidery for generations, footwear for generations, pleating for generations, all these kind of things. And so over time, a lot of these sort of craft houses have been going extinct because of how globalized fashion has become. Back when all the big couturiers, when we're talking about, you know, the Christian Dior's of the world, we're talking about the Cristobal Balenciagas of the world, we're talking about the El Scapis, the Coco Chanel's, all these kind of, when they were, you know, couturiers back then, they used to use all these craftspeople because they all used to make haute couture, and that was actually the main thing they were selling outside of maybe like perfume for like Chanel and like millinery and stuff like that. And they had the customers for that who are willing to pay really high prices. But as fashion steered more and more into ready to wear, into leather goods, into belts and like all these different trinkets and stuff, and moving production to China, it put all these different craft houses out of business. And it meant that all this expertise that had been built for years and years kind of started to fizzle out. So I think it's so beautiful, considering that Chanel makes billions and billions, that they've reinvested and acquired a lot of these craft houses. And so anytime you see like a Chanel Métiers d'Art collection, this is a collection that is using all the skills of a lot of these craft houses that Chanel has acquired over the years, essentially, or they work closely with. So there are so many of them that I can go into. So the first one I won't talk about all of them. You can see some of them on the screen here. On the screen, I think they're missing one. This Wikipedia page needs to be updated because I don't think they have Lognon, like the pleating house. I can't see that there. There's quite a few other famous ones. So yeah, I think they're missing a few. But just to kind of go through some of the craft houses that are really important. So the first one is Maison de Rue. Now, Maison de Rue is really, really important. Now, why is it important? This was actually the first craft house that Chanel acquired. Chanel acquired them in 1985. And their expertise is making buttons and specialty jewelry. So they are decorative, like button makers, essentially. So that's their area of expertise. Also, it's important to mention that these craft houses don't only make things for Chanel. So yes, they are owned by Chanel, but they, like, you'll see a lot of these like Lesage making stuff for like Dior and stuff. Like, so it's not just Chanel. They kind of make clothing for a lot of the luxury brands, especially when it comes to couture collections. So I thought that would be interesting to mention. So you have Maison de Rue, you have Lesage, which is like the super, super famous one. I'm sure almost all of you that are really into fashion would have heard about Lesage, like really, really famous. They are famous for embroidery. That's like their area of expertise. Really legendary French maison. They do embroidery for a lot of houses. They do tapestries. I believe they were founded in 1924 and they've been acquired by Chanel. The really important thing about Lesage also is they have their school where they teach people how to do embroidery. So not only are they preserving, the craft between, the embroidery within the house, making this amazing embroidery for craft for all the different houses, they also teach people. That's really, really important so they can keep the craft alive. But I think Lesage is like probably one of the more famous brands, but as you guys see on their Instagram page, they said official account for Lesage the Embroidery Atelier, so that's really famous. Another house that's really famous is Lemarié. So they make like feathers As you can see in the description, they said specialize in feathers, couture, flowers, plissé, and textile. So they're known for feathers mainly, but they do all sorts of like other pieces. As you can see, all the different like feathers they're creating here. This is a piece that they created for the Chanel show, the Métiers, the art show that we're going to talk about. So they make all these different like embellishments, but they really specialize in, you know, feathers, which is cool. Also really important to the house of Chanel. They were acquired, I believe, in 2005 by Chanel. Another house is Massaro Paris. They are footwear makers. They've been making bespoke shoes for men and women since 1894. They were acquired by Chanel in, I believe, 1996. So they were one of the earlier acquisitions. Once again, they make a lot of the craft footwear for Chanel, the more expensive footwear, the couture stuff. But of course, like I said, all these houses don't just make Chanel pieces. That would be a waste. They do also make footwear for many other brands too. And also for their own houses. Like a lot of these brands make stuff for their own houses if they sell like in-house stuff. Also, moving on. So Goussons is really famous. Founded in 1950. So they are known for the jewelry. So if you guys know, Chanel has levels of like jewelry. So they have everything from like the costume jewelry, which is really, well, it's not cheap anymore, but it's like not that well made, to be honest, to like the really fine jewelry that's super expensive. Like Chanel has divisions of it that are super expensive. Obviously not couture, but Chanel makes watches that are actually really good. And like the watchmaking, the level of watchmaking of Chanel is actually really high. Also the jewelry, because they work with a lot of these like craft jewelry houses to make a lot of the really fine jewelry. So this is definitely one of them. And then another one I'll talk about, the last one I'll talk about is Maison Lemarié, which is the pleating house. This is also a really famous one. Everyone taught, this is, for example, this is actually Dior collection. This is a piece for Dior that they did with Kim Jones for spring summer 20. But like I said, it's not just like Chanel that they do stuff for. So sorry, not Lemarié, but Longyon does the pleating. This is their website here. Just wanted to show you guys. 1853 by Emily Longyon, who had the idea of curling fabrics using her irons. They specialize in pleats, and the Longyon, as it says here, artisan started working in the Lemarié workshops in 2013, thus becoming a Chanel métier d'art. So as you guys can see, just some different pleating techniques that they've done over the years. But anyway, I can talk about this forever. They have so many, they've acquired so many houses over the years. Like we could go on and on and on about it, and like all the different things that all these different craft houses do, and kind of, you know, the special things that they do. It's really cool to see that they're preserving craft. For example, Desrouge, which is the company that I said specializes in like button making, they've been partners with Chanel since like 1965, I believe. So it's interesting that over time they ended up acquiring the house and they've kept that craft going. I think that's really cool. So anyway, moving on to the actual runaway. This season, the Chanel Métiers d'Art show was in New York subway station, an abandoned New York subway station that a lot of people use in fashion for campaigns. People have used it over the years. So many people, whether we're talking about Tom Ford or we're talking about so many people, even Cortez, the streetwear brand, did it recently too. So this was really cool. Now, funny enough, I've seen a lot of people talking about like, why did they do a show in a New York subway? Like rich people don't walk in the New York subway. And I actually beg to differ. I totally disagree with that. I think New York is like London in the sense that in London, every social class takes the train. There are millionaires that take the train. In fact, all the rich finance bros that work in the city, almost all of them take the train to go and work in Canary Wharf or wherever they work. Then, you know, working class people take the train to go to work. People take the train to go to school. People take the train to do everything. And I think that New York is a very similar vibe where people of all different social classes take the New York subway. And Matthieu Blazy actually mentioned this in the show notes. He said something to this effect. So to read what he said, to quote him directly, he said, "The New York subway belongs to all. Everyone uses it. There are students and game changers, statesmen and teenagers. It is a place full of enigmatic yet wonderful encounters, a clash of pop archetypes where everyone has somewhere to go and each is unique in what they wear. Like in the movies, they are heroes of their own stories. And that's kind of the starting point of this collection. So in this collection, what he's done is he's designed different characters and tropes of people that you would normally see and typically see when you go on the New York subway, because obviously New York, people in New York are really stylish. I think that New York is one of the most stylish cities in the whole world, to be honest. And the subway is one of those, like, you know, quote unquote, you know, real kind of authentic runaways where you see people, you know, wear really interesting fits. So in this collection, you have all these different characters, the statesmen, the ladies that brunch, you know, the business moguls, the film person, the teenage, the old lady that dresses really chic, the woman that's really into art and she loves Art Deco and she kind of dresses in a very Art Deco way. So all these different characters are all across this collection, and I really liked it and I think it was really fun. I think that, you know, even like you can see this I Love New York is kind of like a riff on the kind of tourism trinkets that you would see people wear when they visit New York for the first time as a tourist and they wear the I Love New York shirts, but also pairing that with a tweed suit. Love it. I absolutely love it. I think that Chanel is well and truly back. I haven't seen a collection that has been this interesting and had this good storytelling since Karl Lagerfeld, to be honest. I don't think that if you guys can call some of them, you know, I can't really think of too many memorable Visiony VR collections, at least not to this effect. This is a collection that people definitely remember. Oh, do you remember that, you know, Chanel Métiers subway collection? I also love the juxtaposition between like a Métiers collection where the pieces are so highly crafted by all these craft houses, and obviously the pieces are going to be insanely expensive, but also in a New York subway. I also think it's very Karl Lagerfeld to do a location runway for a Métiers show or like a pre-for resort show, because that's what Karl Lagerfeld used to do a lot, to be honest. She did the show in Manchester. That was the resort show she did in Manchester. Yeah, that was... Yeah, I want to forget about that Manchester show that she did. That was weird. And that was the same show that she took people to a Manchester United game the day before to immerse Chanel customers in Manchester culture. Really strange, really odd. But also, this rift and this idea of going to a New York subway, outside of, you know, the idea of having all these different characters on the New York subway, even there was like a Superman sweater, which is kind of like a trope to kind of this Hollywood idea of what people think of when it's New York. Those are also characters that were seen across the collection. But it's really important to note that Matthieu Blazy looks at the archives of Chanel and he's really looking at kind of what is authentic to the house. And most of you might not know, but in 1931, Coco Chanel first visited New York as a stopover on her way to Hollywood because she wanted to consult with Samuel Goldwyn, because that was around the time. And if you guys are on Patreon, I've actually talked about this before, but around the 30s and the 40s, a lot of couturiers started to realize that Hollywood was a massive opportunity for couturiers and that Hollywood was so big and so glamorous, and that if they could dress a lot of these Hollywood actresses in movies and do costume design for the films, you know, their brands would be big worldwide, in America, but also worldwide, and they would reach, you know, new markets. So there was a time at first when people were trying to convince these couturiers to, you know, dress these actresses and actors in Hollywood films, and they like refused. They're like, that's not real fashion. And it's quite funny, over time you see a lot of these couturiers slowly kind of easing how strict and rigid they are about all these ideas of what like haute couture is and where haute couture should be and who should be allowed to wear their brands. And, you know, over time, they kind of were a bit more relaxed. And so that's when you started to see Coco Chanel, who was one of the earlier ones, start dressing, you know, and doing costume design for Hollywood films. Of course, we have the likes of Givenchy. We know all about the famous films that Givenchy was dressing in, and we have these collaborative relationships between like couturiers and actresses like Audrey Hepburn and stuff like that. So that is kind of like where this idea to do a New York show comes from. Kind of the fact that she visited New York on her way as a stopover to go to Hollywood, and kind of there are all these like pictures of Coco Chanel in New York and kind of what she was doing and hanging around New York and all that sort of stuff. So it's kind of like adopting kind of this idea of New York and kind of modernizing what kind of that vision of New York would be if it was 2025. So it makes all the sense in the world. So I don't understand why people are saying that it doesn't make sense for Chanel to do a New York runaway from all angles. The angle about rich people don't take the subway is not true. The angle about it's not true to the brand is not true, because it's referencing Coco Chanel actually going to New York in 1931. So that's something I found really odd about the discourse online, to be very honest with you. I hate that Superman. Yeah, I do think it's very goofy, but I think it makes sense in terms of the ideas of the collection. Here we can see some amazing craft. Let's see what people are saying. It seems that you believe Matthieu Blazy is doing a vastly better job with the archives of Chanel than Demna is with the archives of Gucci. Oh yeah, 100%. I just think that Matthew's storytelling, for now at least, is a lot better. The way he's delving into the archives and using that to do storytelling is also interesting. I think the issue with Demna is that Demna's clothes just look like Tom Ford with a slight twist, or like Alessandro Michele with Tom Ford sensibilities. So it's not as point of difference as what Matthieu Blazy is doing. So I think that's kind of why I'm enjoying the way he's referencing the Chanel archives versus Demna's Gucci archives. But I don't mind Demna's Gucci. I do like it. Maybe not I prefer his first collection to his last one, but I'm not opposed to Demna's Gucci. Yeah, I totally agree with this, by the way. The striped dresses are so Mathieu coded. Chavs and Shin. Are you talking about the Manchester show? The finance bros from New Jersey take the train to Grand Central, I believe. They could drive, but NYC traffic. Yeah, this is also another reason, even in London too, why rich people don't really drive. It's because, well, first of all, like, you can't really, there's nowhere to park in London to be, like, if you go really central, good luck finding parking. So that's one issue. Another issue is that the traffic is just so much, especially during rush hour in London, that you won't get to your meeting on time. If you want to get to your meeting on time, the best way is probably to take the underground train. So that's why people of all social classes end up just taking the train. It's very hard to understand if you didn't grow up in one of those cities like London or New York, because in many other parts of the world, taking public transport is associated with being working class. Even in the US, like, I've been to the US enough times to know this, right? Like, when I was in LA and I took the train, when you're there, you can sense that, like, the people that are there in the train, like, the energy in the train is like, oh, I probably as a tourist should not be taking this train. So even in the US, in other parts of the US, like, public transport definitely very much is a thing that, you know, working class people, and mainly only working class people, use. But in New York specifically, that isn't really the case. In New York, there are a lot of people of all social classes that don't even own a car. Whereas in most other parts of the US, you can't survive without having a car, because, like, how are you going to get around? Like, you won't be able to. So I think just depends where, you know, where you're from. It just depends where you're from, where you've grown up. So I think a lot of the discourse is because maybe a lot of people aren't from a city like London or New York. So it's hard for them to, like, get to grips with that. I said, yeah, trains in LA are crazy compared to the NYC. Nobody takes the train in LA, mate. Yeah, that's why I was like, when I was in LA, it was like, should I be here? I feel like I'm gonna get shot. Like, I feel like I'm going to get mugged. Oh my god. People are asking, does LA have trains? How do people not know that LA has a metro system? Do people not know that LA has a metro system? Americans, teach your fellow Americans that you guys have a metro system. I mean, I've been on a train in LA, so obviously I know that there are trains. Blazy makes beautiful clothes, but design theory doesn't fit Chanel to me. This is a lifelong position. I don't think I can take 10 to 15 years of this. Yes, that is true because Matthieu Blazy is, I mean, Chanel said that they like to have creative directors for really long periods. So Matthieu Blazy is probably going to be there for a really long time. And I don't, what would you say doesn't fit Chanel? Because the tweed suits are there. There are maybe elements of it, like an I Love New York piece, you know, like different pieces here and there. But at the end of the day, when you go into the store, you're just going to see a lot of tweed suits. And at the end of the day, when the couture customers that, you know, the couture women that have been buying Chanel haute couture for 30 years in a row, there's all those kind of like diehard Chanel customers, like billionaire women and stuff like that, millionaire women, they are just going to go and be like, what color tweed suit can I get this season? So I think what is presenting is very Matthieu Blazy coded, like stuff like this, for example, like this kind of feather kind of piece. That's very not Chanel and more Matthieu Blazy. But I think overall, when we look at kind of how people are going to wear it, I think what people will buy will be those things. No funny shit. Ayo is not exaggerating. Chat like the LA trains. If you miss one stop and you're heading to Long Beach, you're done. If you go on the bus, you're done. It's next. It's crazy. Yeah, I was scared when I was on the LA train because I have my London mentality. So I'm like, if I don't need to drive or like take an Uber, if there's like good public transport, I'll just take the public transport because that's what I'm used to. So I was like, oh, LA has trains. This is the first time I went to LA. And then I hopped on the train and I was like, whoa, I might get robbed at gunpoint. But yeah, it was a really enjoyed the Chanel collection. I will say the collection is very hit and miss. In terms of like even that skirt with the cityscape of, let me see if I can pause on that. There's a skirt that has the cityscape of New York. That's kind of, I like the technique, but it's kind of weird looking, but I do like the technique. This is the skirt with the cityscape and some of the famous buildings of New York kind of made all into one skirt. Obviously the craft is really nice, but yeah, there's pieces that are cool. There's like Superman sweaters that I think are really odd, but overall I like it. I love the storytelling. I love the callback to Coco Chanel going to New York. Big fan of what Chanel does with the Métiers de art collections because I think it's really important that we saved craft in fashion. It's so important. What was that Christmas sweater randomly in the mix? I know it was a bit random. Yeah, very Art Deco. That's what I was saying about earlier when I said there are all these different characters in the collection, like the woman that loves art and Art Deco, and she dresses like it. It's very Art Deco. I love the soundtrack that paired with this collection. I hated the preview film that they did for it. Yeah, I like the collection, but it looks like Dev Moore content farming, and he's a content farmer too. No, Matthieu Blazy is a content farmer. Don't get it twisted. He definitely is a clip farmer. Like he farms clips. I think the as almost torn edges give it an awkward shape. The styling is just off. Yeah, some of the styling is off with some of these pieces. Totally agreed. Still like the collection, but I do agree with that. And the kitsch elements have character. But that's the thing though, Chanel is kind of kitschy. Now, let me take that back slightly. Coco Chanel, like original Chanel, isn't kitschy. Karl Lagerfeld Chanel is kitschy because when you think of original Coco Chanel, it's classic. Like, what is Coco Chanel famous for? It's, you know, taking kind of creating ease in a woman's wear. It's taking menswear codes like sailor uniforms, military uniforms, tailoring for menswear and kind of making that more feminine, taking fabrics from menswear like jerseys and tweeds and that sort of stuff. That like tweeds are more back then were associated with like hunting jackets or like sports jackets that, you know, men would wear. So taking all those kind of things and then creating women's wear that's comfortable for women by women, creates ease. There's easy movement, also creating a versatility in a woman's wardrobe. So like one thing that Chanel used to emphasize, because a lot of people historically say that Coco Chanel is as much a couturier as she is a stylist, because a lot of her customers would literally look to how she dressed as how to wear the clothing. So how she wore the clothing was really important in how the customers were going to wear it and how they were going to buy it. So that's kind of like this sort of Coco Chanel had this sort of day to night idea where you can wear full Chanel tweed suit and then you can wear kind of ballet flats during the day and then wear pumps at night. So it's kind of like having that versatility. Of course, she used to wear a lot of pearls, so all this kind of thing. So there were all these elements to it, but I don't think it was very kitsch back then. It was very classic. These like LBDs that she was making, like it was quite classic, to be honest. But when Karl Lagerfeld came in, what Karl Lagerfeld did is he came in and he turned it on its head. So he actually, in a sense, did everything that Coco Chanel would not do. So if Coco Chanel would make this jacket in black, he would make it in some crazy blue. If Coco Chanel would make this bag in leather, he would use towel fabric or something like that, which he actually did. He actually did that, like make bags out of towels. So he is the one, I think, that kitchified Chanel in a cool way, in a fun way that people loved. People liked that he modernized Chanel in that way. So I think this sort of like kitsch idea of what we think of Chanel, I think that's definitely very more Karl Lagerfeld. And I think that Matthieu Blazy can do that. Because Matthieu Blazy, I think he plays a lot with colors and textures and fabrics. We saw this at Bottega Veneta, and I think this is something we're going to continually see at Chanel. I definitely expect it from him, to be honest. She could also make clothes herself, unlike that Italian lady. Don't make me laugh. Not the Schiaparelli and Coco Chanel beef. Not the Schiaparelli versus Coco Chanel couturier war of the 20th century. Blazy Chanel is less reliant on the logo, which is nice, particularly in the jewelry or getting designs that don't revolve around a double C logo. Agreed. Those Terry 90s pieces were so good. We also need future vintage from Blazy. I don't see any pieces that people will want 20 years from now, except maybe that gold distressed bag from the last collection. I think kind of like one of the let me show you, because there's so many references to Coco Chanel herself, like for example, like the dogs in the collection. This look is actually a look that's more associated with Coco Chanel herself. This look here is more classic. I think this look is definitely timeless. I definitely think this look is timeless. Like you can wear this in like 20 years from now. I think there are a few looks here and there that like you can wear 20 years from now. Not loads, but there are a few. Right now, the only exciting thing is waiting for Stefano Pilati to accept our money. Aren't you tired of the fashion musical chairs? Are we not tired of that yet? The collection is beautiful, however, it feels like a mixture of what he's done at Bottega and what he's trying to bring at Chanel. This is a perfect statement, and I totally agree. Completely 100% agree. However, what I will say is, what do you want him to do? Because we loved him for his Bottega, so we kind of do want some elements of his Bottega in the Chanel. Obviously, it's really obvious in this collection, but like that's not, I wouldn't say a bad thing necessarily. Yeah, I don't think that's necessarily like a bad thing. But yeah, if you guys want to learn more about this collection, here are the show notes. They talk about like all the inspirations. They talk about all the different characters in the show notes. They talk about, you know, some of the inspirations for some of the looks. Oh, they even mention, actually, I forgot, like Art Deco as one of the inspiration points. They talk about the savoir-faire and the maisons. They're talking about the fact that it's an amalgamation of elevated craft and pop culture, elegantly witty high style, all these different techniques like lingerie denim, which is, you know, complex embroideries used to make this kind of like denim effect piece. They talk about the flannels, everything here. And no point me reading it because you guys can just, you know, read it for yourselves. I'll post it in the chat so you guys can have a read for yourselves. But yeah, really cool ideas. I definitely loved this Chanel collection, this Métiers d'Art collection from Matthieu Blazy. I think that he's bringing intrigue back to Chanel for sure. And hopefully this continues and the interest at Chanel stays. Someone said it's a yap fest. Yeah, I only read out the show notes if they are short, because otherwise it's like boring. I feel like when I'm streaming, it's not interesting, as you guys can tell me as viewers. I feel like it would be boring if I was just sat here like reading the show notes, even though it would be important, I guess, for me to talk about the ideas. But I always read the show notes beforehand, so I already know what the ideas are anyway before I come onto the stream. But I guess just for the understanding of people, because I might just be talking about things here and there, but people don't actually understand that some of these things I know because they've specifically been mentioned in the show notes, like specific techniques that they've talked about. But yeah, this ain't a book club. Yeah, that's what I do in the fashion book club, which is what it's for. But I think in a stream, it's just not entertaining. I feel like on Patreon, it's fine because people go into it knowing that it's a fashion book club. But yeah, we only need the show notes reading when we get a truly baffling collection. Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Or if the designer is just waffling. Yeah. I do actually read them when I think the show notes make no sense. When I read show notes and I'm like, this is so stupid, I do tend to read them because it's just like, normally when show notes are really silly, that's normally when a collection is going to be really bad because it shows there's a mismatch in like the ideas. There's no like, what's even the right word? There's no like congruence between the different elements in the collection, and that's why you can see that the show notes are all over the place. These things normally align. This ain't your grandma's channel. Demna's debut collection show notes are gonna feed the streets, yeah. Okay, from the first line, I do really agree that he did not go far enough with the actual models themselves to make them feel like characters. Like the clothes would work with more elaborate hair. Agreed. And the characters could also come with, it's kind of, this is what we love about John Galliano, right? Because if it was a John Galliano collection and they had all these different characters, they would come with certain sensibilities and the way they walk. I mean, considering that they're walking in and out of the runway, they could have done more set design to showcase the different characters. So if someone is like the newspaper reader that drinks coffee in the morning, maybe there's like a newspaper stand, and then there's like someone just like giving out newspapers, and then that person is like chasing the stand to try and catch the newspaper before the train leaves. Like there's so many like interesting things that they could have done in that sense. But that's why, hopefully designers see these streams and stuff and see that there's many more elements that they can go to when it comes to these collections. Claire White Keller does not get enough respect as she should. Her collection she did at Givenchy, especially the couture, was beautiful. She needs to take over a new house besides Uniqlo. Yeah, I mean, we used to cover Claire White Keller. We said that her Givenchy was amazing. I never thought that anything that Claire White Keller designed was bad. I just think that it wasn't selling for whatever reason. People didn't gravitate towards it, which is why she basically had to leave, because they needed a designer that would bring in more intrigue and, sell more. But in terms of the merit of the clothing itself, I don't think I've ever thought Claire White Keller was a bad designer. I think she's an amazing designer, and I think at Givenchy, most of what she did was really good. Yeah, like the lady with exotic pets, or the person who had to rush because they slept in too long. Yeah, exactly. It would have been really fun. But that's why every design is different. That's what we would have gotten if it was John Galliano, because I think that John Galliano thinks in like terms of theatre and like these sort of things. So he thinks many layers past just the surface. And also, I totally agree. It is very hard to follow Karl's sets. Karl's sets were so elaborate. Like, I really want to know what the budgets for some of Karl Lagerfeld's sets were, because some of them were insane. He would turn a place into a whole beach with the water and everything. Like, he would do crazy stuff. His sets did not make sense. Like, the amount of money they would spend on those was outrageous. But that's all part of world building. The reason why Chanel is one of the most valuable companies in fashion right now is because of how good Karl Lagerfeld was at world building and how much he built desire. Like, everyone wanted to go to those shows because it was like just such a big like spectacle to see those elaborate sets. So yeah, he would ship in ice from another cut. Like, he was doing crazy stuff. Like, he was doing insane stuff. Someone definitely could have walked this runway with wet hair. We all have that co-worker, the co-worker that washed their hair and didn't dry it because they were in a rush. So they left their house with wet hair, and yeah, now they're on the subway with wet hair. Yeah, definitely. I know this person all too well. All too well. Karl did an amazing job for Chanel in the last 30 years, but also at Fendi. Yeah, agreed. R.I.P. Karl Lagerfeld. But yeah, those are kind of my thoughts on the Chanel show. There's not really much more to say, to be honest. We've kind of gone through like every single element of it. Let me see if there's any more interesting facts that they've put on their Instagram page, just in case I'm missing anything. Let's have a look. Okay, this is in conversation with the artisans of the Maison. I might have to watch this later. Let me see. We can watch this. I just want to see what the background music is. Okay, yeah, we can't watch it. The background music is copyrighted. But you guys can watch it in the background. Enjoy the subtitles. I do feel like they should have included at least one crackhead in the show. And if they couldn't do that, at least give us a crackhead look. The problem is, so I would understand if there was like a crackhead in the show, although it kind of would be in bad taste because ultimately we can't forget the context. It's still a Chanel show. And when you're a luxury brand that sells, haute couture pieces for 100K plus, and you're putting, métier looks on someone that's supposed to look homeless, people will have an issue with it. People will think like it's making a mockery of working class people. This has been a critique for designers, historically. It's the same thing as John Galliano. This happened with John Galliano in his show, right? Everyone was like, oh my God, how can you reference homeless people in the context of a luxury brand and put that on the runway? So it's just, I don't know. A lot of people would have issues with it. I can understand it from a storytelling standpoint and really wanting to tell the story authentically. But I think in the context of Métiers, the art show, it just, I don't know. And I only think that the only reason why John Galliano even got away with that all the way back then was because I think society was a bit more tolerant to things like that. Like you being allowed to put crazy things like that into your storytelling, right? Where even Marc Jacobs at Perry Ellis, right? And he was doing grunge and stuff. But anyway, I feel like just the social political climate now, I just don't think it allows you to do that. I don't even think that Luke is saying that was John's best collection for Dior. I don't think that John Galliano could do that collection now and it be received well. Even back then it wasn't received well, but now I think it would be like, it would receive so much worse, to be honest. I don't know. But there's many other characters they could tap into other than just like crackheads. Yeah, exactly this. Why should poverty become chic only when rich people find it amusing? Yeah, it's like wealth mockery, exactly. So I could understand why people would have an issue with that, to be honest. Matthieu was able to get away with bringing in a huge variety of different styles of Bottega because it wasn't a big house like Chanel, but now he needs to be a bit more streamlined. Yeah, I mean, to be honest though, he's only done 2 collections. He's going to find, like we've been mentioning, he's there for the long haul. So he's going to find his footing eventually and find kind of his own idea of what his Chanel would be, and I think he'll find that balance eventually. It will take some time, but he will get there eventually, to be honest. At least I believe so. Whole new meaning to street theatre. Could have had someone busking. That's a good idea. That would have been cool. But see, once again, it's like we are adding layers to the storytelling, but it's because we've seen collections like this from designers before, like John Galliano, who, like, when they think about storytelling, they think of all the layers of it. It would have been even more interesting. I think if they had done storytelling to that level, it might have been received the way that John Galliano's viral collection was received, in the sense of like everyone just like talking about it and it being like one of those ones. But Matthieu Blazy has way more time to do that in future collections. At the very least, some rats dragging a pizza out of the garbage can. Those massive ass rats. New York is a scary place. Like, New York rats are the size of like baby cats. That place is a crazy place. But anyway, those are my thoughts on Chanel, the Chanel show. Those are my thoughts on the Chanel show. If you have any other thoughts, let me know. Let your thoughts be known in the comments. This YouTube channel runs on your support. If you want to support the channel, you can subscribe to my Patreon. You'll gain access to exclusive content that includes everything from my Patreon podcast, where I give a behind-the-scenes insight into the fashion industry, as well as a fashion book club, where I review my favorite fashion books. You can also check out my fashion ebook, which highlights the best fashion journalists to follow, definitions of common fashion terminology, and how to determine what a good source of fashion information is. The links to everything are in the description below.